Welcome to the Leading Generations podcast from Antioch Bible Baptist Church in Gladstone, Missouri. Each week, the podcast focuses on helping our church family live out its mission of leading generations to make disciples of Jesus Christ everywhere. Thanks for listening.
Welcome back to another week of the Leading Generations podcast. We're grateful that you're joining us again as we continue to look at the spiritual discipline of stewardship. So if you go back to last week's episode, you can catch our first episode on stewardship, where we focused and talked through the parable of the talents that Jesus gave in Matthew 25. And we talked about stewardship really in the context of humility, obedience, and focus. So that's recognizing God's ownership of things, pursuing faithful management, and investing in eternal priorities. And we talked about stewardship really in three big categories, which is time, money, and talents, or you could say time, treasure, and talents. And so go back and listen to get caught up for this week's episode. But today we're talking about it, Steve, from kind of a practical point of view. How do we personally and as a family, as individuals, steward the things that we have well? Mm-hmm. So just to kind of jump right into it, what comes to your mind when you think of bad stewardship?
Yeah, well, I think if we go back to the parable that we're using, the parable of the talents, obviously the one talent guy is an example of a bad steward. Mm-hmm. So we know from that story that he takes the talent that's given to him, he buries it, and he doesn't do anything with the talent. Mm-hmm. So I think the first sort of thought with a bad steward is they don't use the talent, the treasure, their time to honor the Lord. They're not investing it. So I think that is what a bad steward is that they are not using what God's given them for God or for others. Because I was thinking through that question, and I thought about verse 24, that when this steward stands before the servant stands before the master, and he brings back the one talent, he says, "Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours." But the master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. Just that idea that he ought to have invested it. So a bad steward doesn't invest their time, talent, treasure in things that, as we've talked about, in things that are eternal priorities. Mm-hmm. So that is an idea that comes to mind when I think of a bad steward.
Yeah. And I think we should probably be a little bit transparent here. There are definitely times in my life when I feel like I've been a bad steward.
No doubt. Yeah.
So I think I say that to say I don't think that this is a spiritual discipline to grow in.
Sure.
Right.
I think that's a good word to say, and to remind all of us of that. This is not a perfection thing. Like, man, I get time all right every day, and I invest in things that are important. I think about sometimes our evenings. My kids are older, obviously. Our evenings can turn into sitting around scrolling and sharing reels with each other. You know what I'm saying? And laughing together. So I don't know that that's probably the best use of my time, being a good steward, if we're doing that every night as a family rather than sitting around talking or, praying together, reading a book together, doing something that would grow us as opposed to just laughing at reels together. But so I think that's a good reminder, man, that these are things we're growing towards. We want to be good stewards, but if we have a bad day here and there, it's not like the Lord sitting down like, man, I'm so disappointed in you. Because I'm sure you think of the 5 talent guys and the 2 talent guys. I don't think every day was probably profitable. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a lifestyle, more of a mindset of that direction, as opposed to I've got to get down to every day. That just wears me out too, to think about.
Yeah. And I think, even when you're trying to live a lifestyle of being a good steward for the Lord, things still just happen. Like I think of financial situations for me and my family recently, and it's like, man, I thought I was making a really good decision there. And it ended up being really bad, and not a very wise financial move. So it's just, I think the thing that I think of when I think of what it looks like to be a bad steward is just how much we need God's wisdom to make these good decisions, but also God's grace, because sometimes we think we're really doing a great job in making the good decisions, and it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So that's bad steward. We talked a little bit, just to recap, kind of last week. But what is a good steward?
Yeah, and again, I think going back to our parable, well, what did the 5 talent guy and the 2 talent guy do that made them good stewards of the talents that the master had given them? Well, they invested it, right? So I think, not to oversimplify it, but like a bad steward is one who's not investing what God's given them. A good steward is one who is investing the talent, the time, the treasure that God's given them to the best, if we would want to put it that, by God's grace, to the best of their ability and their knowledge. They're investing their time, talent, and treasure in things that matter for eternity. So I think that's what a good steward looks like.
So trying to bring it to a little bit more of a practical level. So we're talking about stewardship in the context of time, treasure, and talents. But what are some specific things within that? Like, what are we specifically trying to steward well? Maybe within those things or even outside of those things. But what are specific things? I think of our relationships, our homes. Like what specific things do you think are most important that we steward well?
Yeah, I love the idea of thinking about relationships, right? Like, again, within my time, talent, and treasure, I got to think through what's my most important relationship, which is my relationship with the Lord. That's where everything begins. So as I'm thinking about stewardship, I need to think about how am I viewing my day through the lens of my relationship with the Lord. And again, going back to I keep doing this, but this is our parable that we're looking at. Those 5 talent guys and 2 talent guys were thinking about the use of what they'd been given because of their master. They were thinking through the lens of their relationship with their master, that they wanted to be good stewards of it. So I think that's where it begins with us, is our relationship with the Lord. And then, for our particular situation, like next would be our wives. Like I want to steward my marriage well. And then you go to the next area. If you're thinking priorities or you're thinking circles, the next layer is my kids, right? And then you've got friendships and work and those things. So I think that's again, getting it down to a more micro level of things that we're stewarding. I would think about relationships. What are other things that would come to your mind that you think about when it comes to stewarding?
Yeah, I mean, I think about, for a lot of people, I think about our jobs, like our careers, you might say, stewarding that position that God has given you for His glory, right? So we can kind of work through a career in a way that is either self-serving or in a way that is being stewarded for God and His kingdom and His glory for the good of our family. I think about our homes. So it's easy. I think this is maybe more of a struggle for a lot of people, but just kind of being selfish with our homes. Like our home is our space. It's for us. Yeah. It's for our family. rather than how can I steward, God's given me this big home with a big backyard or a pool, or,
Sure.
God is giving me this dining room table to have people around. How am I, how am I stewarding that to be welcoming and hospitable and loving to others? So I think of those kind of more practical things. How do we view our possessions as a means to serve others and serve the Lord?
Yeah.
Rather than kind of hoarding that to ourselves.
Yeah, that's that idea of possessions is another good one to really think through. And if, again, as you're thinking about stewardship, as God's giving you your home, your car, your pool, and I, again, the thing I love about our church families, people's, when I think about possessions and people who steward it well, there's people who come to mind in our church that it's like, man, those people, they hold their stuff with open hands. They want to steward it well, use it for the good, for the glory of God and the good of others, and they really do well with that. But that's a mind shift change, right? Yeah. That idea of God's given it all to me, and I'm supposed to use it all, again, including things like my home, like my kitchen table, my backyard. All those things can be used for God's glory. That's just being a good steward of what He's given us.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking in terms of kind of taking this in phases, so I think a lot of what we've been talking about is great for maybe the single individual, the person who's kind of trying to figure this out by themselves. These principles, especially from Matthew 25 and the parable of the talents, as they're able to individually make decisions for themselves on how to steward things well. Yeah. We've talked about kind of the heart posture for that, using those things for the Lord. Taking that into the context of marriage, how do we get on the same page in a marriage to steward our, time treasures? How do we steward those things well within a marriage?
So real practical here, and a lot of counseling that I do with couples is you got to have a weekly meeting. I know that sometimes that doesn't sound very sexy or, like fun, but I really do think that's a big part of staying on the same page and talking through those things together. And talk about this in the premarital counseling I do as well, but it's like you got to, with your budget, right? Let's just talk about, I mean, we could walk through all those, but like you think about your treasure. So it's like, here's a monthly budget. Let's look at it together. Are we good with where the money's going? And then we can talk about, hey, I'd like to budget more to give, or I'd like to give to this person. And you're working through that together as a couple. But you got to have a time to do that, right? So you got to get it on your calendar to say, this is a time that we're going to sit down and talk about our treasure. And then time, again, another important, I think you could do a budget in a monthly meeting, but I think a weekly meeting of, hey, let's talk through our schedule and when can we meet with people or have people over, or, like what's been on your heart to do to steward our family. And so maybe that's family meals, but this night we're going to do something different, and just talking through that. So I think on a real practical, again, a lot of times give this counsel to people that I'm doing marriage counseling with, is just, you got to have a time that you're meeting together. And again, if it's early in the morning, and I know, you got small kids, that's hard. You're up late all hours of the night, but you got to just take time to say, hey, let's look at our schedule, and here's what's on my heart, here's what's on your heart. And I would say at a practical level, don't feel like you got to get it fixed that week, right? Like, be willing to throw, if as financially, if there's things you want to do, throw it out and let it sit. It doesn't have to be like, we got to do that tomorrow, or we got to do it in this month's budget, but maybe that's down the road. You're just, because you're sharing your heart with each other. The same with time. You may want to have more people over, because you're going to have more than likely in a marriage, like an introvert more and an extrovert. And so the introvert's like, I want our home just to be for us. And I don't want to have a bunch of people over. The extrovert's like, the more the merrier, let's fill up the house. And so being able to sit down and process those things together, for the introvert's mind to come around to, hey, this would be good. The extrovert to slow their roll a little bit and be able to come around to see it from their perspective. So I think that would be just another little practical piece of advice is give it time. It doesn't have to be like, we got to get it fixed today and we're going to be on the same page. There'll be, and again, I see it happen all the time. And in my own marriage, where we'll sit down to have conversations and it turns into a little bit of a argument. And so we got to let it rest. And then the next week we're talking about it again. And, it's like there's some push and pull, in that, and we're trying to figure it out. So be patient with each other and you'll get there. So I think that's a good question. That's a practical way to think through that.
Yeah. I think at least in my experience, in my own marriage, it seems like the majority of arguments and disagreements come over time, treasure, or talents.
Sure.
And how those things are stewarded.
Yeah.
And I do think, communication seems to be the best remedy for stewarding those things well and avoiding that. Because most of the time when my wife and I disagree, it's because she had a certain expectation for something and I had a certain expectation and neither one of us really communicated that very well.
Yeah.
And then that leads to disagreement. But yeah, I agree. I think the communication is key, especially when it comes to, sharing your heart with the other person to say, here's what I think we need this week, or here's where I feel like I'm struggling, or I could use more family time, less family time, that kind of stuff. I think, communication is a key component.
I would agree. Again, another practical, I think you got to figure it out. And when kids are smaller, like it's harder to get away from them, right? I'm not trying to say that in a bad way, right? But it's hard to find that time. For Ruth and I recently, even this last week, I've got my sabbatical coming up. And so we went on a walk together. And one of the questions that I asked her was, what are your expectations for my sabbatical? Because it's like, I want to know what she's, even though it's, again, quote unquote, my time, it's not my time. Right. But it's like, I want to know what she desires. Does she has projects that she wants me to do around the house, those kind of things. But for us, it was going on a walk. And again, our kids are older and we could sit at the home or go in our bedroom and close the door. But it was just nice to have that conversation on a walk together. And so I think it's even getting down to that question. Like, I appreciate you sharing that, where it's like, asking your spouse, what are your expectations? Like, what do you want for this week? What would you like this week to look like? I think that's a good way to again, help with stewarding our time, our talent, our treasure well. Yeah.
And again, we shouldn't linger here too long. This isn't really a marriage episode, but
it's family though. It's
but good. I think, I like that you mentioned that, you guys discuss those things on a walk. I think a lot of times, probably when people hear you give that advice in counseling, they think of a very serious sit down, like court is in session type of family meeting.
Like, let's go.
But it's the same we have young kids. So a lot of times for us, what it looks like is usually at some point over the weekend, if it's after bedtime or just in a downtime during the day, just talking through, hey, what do you have going on the upcoming week? And I'll be able to say, well, I have this thing this night and this is an early morning and this is what's going on. But then for us, usually right before we go to bed or at some point, after the kids are in bed at night, it's like, hey, I'll say to my wife, what are you and the girls up to tomorrow? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then that way we can kind of talk through, do I need to be home at this time? Do I need to help with something?
Sure.
Here's what I have going on, so I'm not going to be available.
Yeah.
We can just kind of talk through those things. And that's really practical for a number of reasons in marriage. But a big reason that it's practical is because what we're talking about in those conversations is our time, our treasure, and our talents, and what we're using them for. And so we're able to say, either, hey, we're using these well, or I think we should use them differently for different purposes.
Yep.
So,
so good, man.
Yeah. So what about kind of taking it to the next, I guess, life stage? How do we as parents teach our kids to steward things well? Yeah. I remember growing up and having the, getting my first bank account with my parents, right?
Yeah.
And there wasn't a conversation there necessarily of like, this is your treasure and this is what you do with it. And this,
Right. Yeah, sure.
But how do we teach our kids and help our children to grow into good stewards for the Lord?
I think it's the old adage, more is caught than taught, right? So I think as parents, we have to think that direction first and foremost. Like they're watching our life more than they're going to be listening to our words. And so we have to be living a life of good stewardship with our time, talent, our treasure. I feel like we're saying time, talent, treasure.
I know.
A lot. We need to have like a word count on that going. But we could call it the 3 T's, but I don't know if I like that either.
Triple T.
Triple T. That's right. But I think as a parent, you have to start with that level, right? Like more's caught than taught. So if your kids are watching you be bad stewards by not investing your time well, your treasure well, your talent well, they're going to follow your example in some ways more than they'll follow your word. So it puts a lot of pressure on us to lead well through our lives. But then I would say you also do have to teach them in a practical way, like speaking of a bank account, like when you're setting up a bank account, talking through good financial principles. And, the first financial principle that we all should have as followers of Jesus Christ is that we give first to Christ, right? Like, and so we're talking about tithing, even if it's just you're getting your chore money or you're mowing a yard for $30. How much is 10% of that? Teaching them to give in that way. I think you got to talk about those things. When thinking about social media or being on your phones, the great thing is you have tools built within your phone that you can go look at it, or being on Xbox. I get a weekly report on one of my kids' time on Xbox, and then I can go talk with him about that and be like, hey, was this a good steward of your time? This week you spent 8 hours on Xbox one day, and talking through that kind of thing. And then bringing it back to the Lord. So I think practical ways is first, you just it's more caught, right? So we want to make sure that we're living, but then you do just in the day-to-day life. I don't think it's necessarily sitting around the table and being like, here is 10 rules on stewardship, right? But it's talking through the things as you're opening a bank account, as you're looking at how they're spending their time, whether social media, Xbox, with friends, having conversations around those things. I think is a good way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I agree with you. I think especially in the context.
I'm glad you agree with me.
Yeah, that's good, right? It's good that we agree.
Yeah.
But I think especially in the context of having younger children, that idea of more is caught than taught. I was reading a parenting book the other day, and it said, children don't listen, they watch, which is the same idea.
Yes.
But I think especially in that context, for my context, I think one of the things that I'm realizing is most important is just family rhythms and the time aspect of stewardship, of how are we stewarding our time as a family.
Yeah.
And that, I think, more maybe than any other way goes toward that, the observation for your children of, okay, this is where my parents see value. This is where we see value as a family. This is what my parents view as important. And then even if we obviously try to have conversations around that, but even if there's not conversations around that, they at least get to see and understand this is where our priorities are as a family.
Yeah.
And I think that especially with We could talk about, sports commitments,
Yeah, that's what was coming to my
extracurricular
mind.
stuff where it's like, man, if, do your children see you prioritizing extracurricular activities
Mhm.
as a family over church as a family? And, there's, again, we've said, but we love sports. We love those things. But yeah, I think setting your priorities straight as a family when it comes to time
Mhm.
speaks volumes into your children
Yeah.
of where you are placing your love and affection and priorities.
Yeah, man. Yeah, youth sports is. Yeah, we have a whole episode on that. I did last year, but it's a drainer of time and treasure, big time.
Yeah.
And I would encourage any parent who's heavily involved in that to look at the amount of time and the amount of treasure they're putting into that, and seriously consider whether it's eternal investment.
Yeah.
I think that's a good stewardship question to ask about those things.
Yeah. And thinking of the parable of the talents, right, in Matthew 25, is that for parents, is that going to be something that, to your point, yields an eternal investment, right? Are you getting a return on investment, we could say,
Right.
for that time spent or not? Yeah. So just to close,
Yes.
any words of encouragement or challenge for the single person who's thinking through stewardship, either looking towards marriage or just trying to be faithful with what the Lord has given them? I think of, many young adults who are just kind of getting out of high school into the world of kind of having to figure this out on their own. But any thoughts or words of encouragement for single folks?
Yeah, I think for the single young adult, either or, single or young adult, I would say take time to think through this at that stage of your life. Think through how you're stewarding your time, your talent, your treasure, and begin to build habits in your life now that will build towards, again, if God calls you to singleness, then you're building towards a life that's glorifying God. But if you have a heart to want to be married, then you're building habits in your life that will build a strong marriage, that will build a strong family. So start thinking about these things and trying different, being a good steward of your time. What does that look like as far as getting up early? What's your rhythms of life that work best for you, and getting those figured out? How are you investing your money? As a young adult, as a single person, you have a lot more freedom with your money than somebody who's married, somebody who has a family. So how can you use your money for the glory of God? And then thinking about the talent that you have. Again, because you're single, and Paul would talk about this, you can use more of your life for the Lord. So how are you using your talent that God has given you for the Lord? So my encouragement to the single young adult would be really start thinking through these things and implementing habits in your life of being a good steward so that God will be glorified through your life, and it'll be for the good of others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us again this week. Steve, could you remind us of our email?
Yes, it is leadinggenerations@abbc.org. And we would love to hear from you. So, if you enjoy a podcast, don't hesitate to comment on YouTube or like it, but also reach out to us. If you have questions, we always are looking in the last episode of the month to do different things. We've interviewed a lot of people. We enjoy doing that, doing book reviews. But we also would love to do a Q&A every once in a while. So if you have questions, and even if it takes a few months till we get to it, just email us a question. We'd love to hear from you. leadinggenerations@abbc.org.
Yeah, perfect. So hit us up there with anything and everything. We'd love to hear from you. And we're praying for all of you and ourselves that the Lord would work in our lives to grow us into good stewards of the things that He's given us. We'll see you next week on the podcast.